So Chelsea beat Manchester United by a goal to nil. Andy Mitten is on the line, of course, of United We Stand. Andy, it is a very, very important off-season from José Mourinho's perspective. Before we get to what you'd like to see them do, what's the current state of play? Just what is the truth about where this squad is as regards to where they should be from a Manchester United perspective?
The current state of play is that the club don't want another close season of huge turnover of players. They feel that they've invested heavily in the last few years. So ideally they'd want 2 or 3 new players and to retain all but 2 or 3 of the current players. So I'm seeing phrases like, let's clear the deadwood, this squad needs a complete renovation, we need to bring 7 or 8 players in. Certainly not the club's intention. There are a couple of factors you could add into that. It's not just down to who the club wants to sell and want to bring in. If there are players who actively want to leave, then that throws another spanner into the works. And there are a couple of players who are just not happy. Their problem is they're not going to get the same type of money that they get at Manchester United. So it's a question of if they want to leave and play for more minutes, then they're probably going to have to take a pay cut. But there's no desire from United to sell Anthony Martial, for example, even though he's not happy, not been happy with his relationship with José Mourinho could be much better. He's a deeply unhappy player, and that's not to say that his situation is not recoverable, and a lot of fans would back him because he's a very, very talented player. But since Saturday, there's a lot of despondency around. That could have been a chance for the season to finish on a high. Another defeat. The performances have been pretty poor since the derby win against Manchester City in April. And I feel that Manchester United and football perhaps need a break from each other at the moment.
Yeah, it's a funny situation for, I presume, most Manchester United fans to find themselves in, where the thing that brings them joy in life is supporting this team and everything that the team stands for, and yet here they are a little bit ground out by the team and the way that they're trying to play football. What's the way out of this? Like, because I still can't quite work out if José Mourinho is responsible for the squad of players that he has. And so it's hard for me to decide that Mourinho has agency over these players, he's responsible for them, and therefore he holds all the blame, or if it's a squad that is a patchwork of other people's ideas about who should be the Manchester United players.
I wouldn't say anybody holds all of the blame. I'd say there's different percentages here, and Mourinho, given that he's been in charge for 2 years, certainly holds some responsibility. A lot of the players are his. Some of them are ones who he's inherited. But when I asked him when it was fair to judge him, he said after 3 years. So I think that's fair. I know that the club and a lot of fans, they don't want this continual change of new manager coming in saying everything needs to change here. He then needs 2 or 3 years to bring his own players in. And there has been some good results this year, some very good results, and there's been some decent performances as well. But there's frustration that it often takes United to go a goal behind before they start playing. And there's other external factors. The brilliance of Manchester City doesn't help anyone at Manchester United. It's Mourinho's biggest nightmare that 3 miles across the city, Pep Guardiola's doing so well. Liverpool doing so well in the Champions League, and all Liverpool fans looking forward to the game in Kiev and playing very good football with standout players. And I think Salah's got twice as many goals in the league as Romelu Lukaku this season. Now, I can remember having a conversation with someone close to Lukaku in October where he was saying he's absolutely determined to be the Premier League's top scorer this year. It means so much to him, and he's got half the goals of Salah. Now, I think Lukaku actually had a good first season at Old Trafford, but there are lots of issues. I mean, there's issues at every football club in the world. Every fan of every club will always be looking to try and make improvement, but while this is the best team since Ferguson, and those 81 points, it's to Mourinho's credit that he's got them and he's finished second. This is Manchester United. Well, there's players there who are coming and not improving as players. Paul Pogba, who's a hugely talented player, has had another pretty mediocre season. And there are others. Alexis Sanchez earns an absolute fortune. Now, he doesn't decide that. And he does get a little bit of a free pass because he needs time to settle in. But much more is expected of both of them next season.
Yeah, I want to pick up on the point that you make about Manchester United being a lot better to watch when they go one goal down, and I think FIFA should introduce some sort of law where Manchester United should always be given a one-goal handicap, because they're a much better team to watch as a neutral, from a neutral perspective. Like, it's interesting then when you say that there's different percentages of blame to put at different doors around Manchester United. Like, who do you credit to the performances for Manchester United when they are one goal down? Is that Jose Mourinho giving different tactics? Is it the players looking at themselves and saying, well, screw what we've already been told, we're going to play for ourselves now?
I think it's the way Mourinho sets up the team. At West Ham a couple of weeks ago, some of the players were unfamiliar with what was asked of them, and that can cause dissent within the ranks. Mourinho could push back from that and say, well, all of you surround yourselves by yes men. You all earn so much money that someone has to give you bad news in life, and I'm the one who has to do it. I'm the one who has to drop you. I'm the one who has to say that you're not playing well enough. And it just frustrates fans immensely when they go a goal behind or 2 goals behind against Crystal Palace, against Manchester City away, against Tottenham in the semi-final at Wembley, and only then they seem to play. And I don't know whether that's Mourinho on the side with an instruction, okay, play 10 yards further forward now, or a desperation, but it's certainly very frustrating for the fans to watch, because it's not a one-off. And converse to that, when United take the lead, they usually win. There's only 2 games out of the 38 last season where United scored first and didn't win the match. And fans would just like a little bit more entertainment. It's not quite as bad as it was under Louis van Gaal. It's nowhere near as bad as it was under David Moyes. There definitely has been a progression, but the last 6 weeks has been very flat for United.
Are you one of those people who catastrophise the style of play because Mourinho has transmogrified from a manager who... So Eidur Johnson pre-match was talking about how when he was at Chelsea under Mourinho, the team was told to attack and they had brilliant attacking players right throughout the team. Now it seems as if the team are unbelievably structured and not quite, as you said, to the Van Gaal level of the never being able to stray out of their zones, but ultimately the sense is that Mourinho has changed, football has changed the opposite direction, and he's becoming increasingly conservative as he gets older. And so therefore the style of play issue will never actually resolve itself under Jose Mourinho.
And yet, against Manchester City in the second half, they looked absolutely fantastic. Against Palace in the second half, they looked fantastic. There are definite issues with the style of play, and there's a disconnect between what the fans want and what the manager thinks is acceptable and what the club think is acceptable. Because for the club, from a financial perspective, finishing second is very good. It's acceptable. Playing in the Champions League, the players get the bonuses if they're playing in the Champions League. But it's utterly baffling when they play against Seville and don't start to play attacking football until they're a goal down. I think 160 minutes into the tie. It is so frustrating, and this is Manchester United, and expectations are much higher than that. I spoke to Eidur Johnson on Saturday at Wembley. I think he was enjoying it more than I was as a former Chelsea man, but he's one of many players I've spoken to who've played under Mourinho who idolise him. You know, players really like him. The more experienced ones, some of the younger ones, they don't like being called out in public, and they have some sympathy from some of the older players as well. His confrontational style, it isn't for everybody, but he's persisting with this. But somebody said to me on Saturday, okay, if you don't want Mourinho to continue, and I actually do, who would you have? Who would you have tomorrow? And I could only think of one person, and that was Pep Guardiola. And that's probably not going to happen. I know you could put a strong case for somebody like Carlo Ancelotti, plays good football, but again, you're getting into this cycle of the continual changes, and I don't think there's much appetite for that at Manchester United.
Yeah, and Pep last week, of course, mentioned his admiration for Jose Mourinho and Manchester United. Did you feel that that was kind of almost patronising, a tap on the head, and almost playing the media game a little bit, because the words like being too hateful against Manchester United might bite him in the ass next year? Or do you feel that there is genuine admiration, that Pep Guardiola sees some sort of, maybe not tactical ingenuity, but some good ideas in this Manchester United team?
I think when you've got a 19-point advantage, it's easier to be magnanimous. But I can remember speaking to Guardiola when he was a young player at Barcelona, and he was very complimentary about Manchester United. His relationship with Sir Alex Ferguson is a strong one. They socialise together. Ferguson's told people who I know in private how much he respects the job that Guardiola's doing, how he's got, what I think he said, he's got them all adoring him and playing for him. And I don't think the same could be said of Jose Mourinho at Manchester United. There's definitely been improvements, not been a terrible season, feels pretty bad since Saturday and in the weeks leading up to the cup final. And the Champions League wasn't good enough. That Seville result was absolutely horrific. But I don't think it's a case of ripping it all up and starting again at huge expense. And even if it does, I don't think there's much appetite from fans for bringing in these world-class players and being convinced that they're actually going to perform to the level of their reputation. People have been burnt now by Angel Di Maria arriving, Bastian Schweinsteiger arriving, and completely underwhelming at Old Trafford. And it's pretty sad that I'm saying that, but it's the truth. Yeah,
much better buying the Martials of the world and trying to turn them into players who can ultimately become first-team players over a period of time. That's the main issue, I think, here, is that Rashford and Martial, those type of players, that coterie of exciting young players who are at the club now, either through the academy or having been bought in, haven't stepped up to be dominant world-class players. You know, so Salah comes in and embarrasses the whole league by being relatively cheap in retrospect as a potential world star. That's the difficulty with football, is that you look 20 miles down the road and suddenly players are performing at a superstar stratospheric level, and maybe it's unfair, but that's the game.
It is the game, and Manchester United dominated and beat Liverpool when they last met, and yet Liverpool are the ones going to the Champions League final. It can infuriate as well as delight people. To be fair to Mourinho, Rashford's had chances and Martial's had chances. They've just not produced as consistently as they should do. They're both immensely talented, especially Martial has got absolutely everything. And I hear United fans complaining, he's surly, he's not happy, he doesn't want to be here. I went to his estate in Paris last month, where he's from. I spoke to his family, I spoke to his coaches. They will tell you a completely different picture of Martial. Then again, they're more predisposed to, because he's one of their own. But the perception which United fans have isn't always an accurate one. And I think confidence levels among some of the players and a frustration with the manager. And again, it's nothing like as bad as it was under Van Gaal. I know one senior player who was castigated because he turned up in the canteen 2 minutes late. And this is a guy with hundreds of Manchester United appearances under his belt. And he said, I cannot work under this man anymore. I'm leaving. And he left. There's not that with Jose Mourinho. But I think when things don't go entirely to plan, there is a culture of blame. And United players are not... I think they're still having the manager. I think they'll still work for him. But at times like this, there's definitely frustration. And probably from him to his players as well, because they're not playing as well as they should be.
Who do you want them to sign, or what positions are the most important positions of need? Fullback seems an obvious one.
Yeah, well, I know that they're looking at a left-back. I know they're looking at a right-back. I know they're looking at a central midfielder. I've asked a lot about Alexandro, the Brazilian, who plays for Juventus. He was asking questions of Manchester United long before he signed for Juventus. He was asking Juventus players who'd been at Manchester United all about Manchester United. But it's all right me saying that. If Juventus say they don't want to sell him, or they want too much for him, then that complicates things further. A right back, because Matteo Darmian, he's not really fulfilled what was hoped of him. Antonio Valencia, he's getting on a bit now. Not had a great season. He did very, very well last season, but not this. And then a midfielder, because Michael Carrick has moved on. Marouane Fellaini might move on, so that might leave a shortage there. And at the moment, they're not looking to sell any of the strikers, but if a striker looks to push out and leave, that could complicate things. And then I'm a little bit worried about the over-reliance on one number 9 on Romelu Lukaku. But then around him, he's got 5 or 6 players, that many, who should all be contributing more and scoring more. I mean, an Alexis Sanchez on form or a Jesse Lingard on form could be great assets for Manchester United. Problem is, Lingard had 2 good months around Christmas. Alexis Sanchez has had 5 games, good games tops. One of them was against Yeovil, who were the 91st club out the 92.
Just one last question from me, Andy. We're probably going to be sitting here chatting to you in 12 months' time, regardless of what is going on at Manchester United. And I know there's a lot of stuff is going to happen between now and then. Do you think we're going to be sitting here at the end of next season and it's going to be as simple as this, that either A, Manchester United have won the Premier League and José Mourinho is going to go into his 4th season as Manchester United manager, or B, Manchester United haven't been anywhere near the Premier League and José Mourinho has already lost his job?
I think they've got to get closer to the Premier League. I cannot see United closing that 19-point gap in 12 months. I think you've just got to be realistic and accept that sometimes football is cyclical. And this Manchester City team are great. Now, something could go wrong there. I saw Guardiola closely at Barcelona and his fuse just burnt out and he had to move on. There's no signs of that at Manchester City at the moment. And I know people who know him very well saying he's delightfully happy with Manchester. Which is obviously to the frustration of Manchester United fans. I think they need to make a more serious challenge on the Premier League. I think they've got to do much better in Europe than get to that last 16 point and freeze against a very inconsistent team who Sevilla were this year. And I don't see any major changes, but Paul Pogba, Martial, the players who I've mentioned, they really need to play better to fulfil the potential, and United need to keep hold of people like David De Gea. He's a world-class goalkeeper, but could you blame him for pushing to go to Real Madrid right now? No. Really? You're from Madrid?
No, definitely not.
You know, you're going to go to a club that wins the European Cup most years, or you're going to stay at one that doesn't?
A brilliant tweet here from Emmett Keane says, at Andy Mitten has a very strong Skype game. Correct camera distance, check. Backdrop of books, check. Smart shirt, check. None of your shaky handheld iPhone shots up the nose with Andy. So indeed, you have definitely got one of the best Skype connections we've ever had. And
look at all my football books behind me.
We were just about to ask. Definitely one of the most impressive bookshelves that we've seen. What's your favourite? Apart from your own books, you can't answer any of your own 600 books.
I have a great passion for books and for printed material, and I love reading about history which has nothing to do with football. I've got some good books about Irish history which I plan to read over the summer. I intend not to travel for 2 months. I'm sick of getting on aeroplanes. I love my job a lot, but I'm absolutely exhausted if I'm honest. Best footballer books? Well, Cascarino's autobiography was fantastic. Eamon Dunphy's book on Manchester United was fantastic. Roy Keane's autobiographies were both fantastic. And that's enough pro-Irish sentiment with my books. I'm just finishing off one with Patrice Evra at the moment. And I'm just up to a section where he has a slight altercation with a fan last November. And that is not dull, trust me. So maybe when that comes out, I can try and get him on the show. Maybe even bring him over to Dublin.
That would be class. That would be class. We hold you to that. Andy, good stuff. Enjoy your holidays. Well deserved. Thanks a million, man.
Thanks for having me.
That's Andy Mitten. Worth a follow on Twitter as well. His season this year, we obviously have had him on a good bit. Took him down to Brazil, took him down to Argentina. There was a lot of travel involved. The piece about Anderson was class.
That was brilliant. That was just one of those opportunities where you can go back and get wistful about a player that you never really thought you would ever do that with, because kind of in the here and the now with Anderson, it was never kind of a moment of like, we would look back on this guy with great admiration in the years to come, but that's exactly what we did. It's I wonder, does he enjoy his job more under José Mourinho?
I'd say
not under José Mourinho, because he doesn't work for José Mourinho, but I mean during the José Mourinho reign at Manchester United.
I'd say you've got to think that working while Ferguson was there, even though every press conference was like, ooh, if I just asked the wrong thing here, I might not be allowed back. Must have been most exciting, because that when you look back, that period of time, that team, those characters, that was the beginning of the building of the empire, and nothing ever equals that again. No. Like these Real Madrid teams at the moment, they're brilliant to watch, right? And there is soap opera, but what makes them stand out? What makes them different from all the other Real Madrid teams? They're just another Real Madrid team who has a slew of Galacticos, and but the foundational text, the ones that get written by the people who chisel it out of nothing, they're the ones that you remember the most.
Well, we are living in the era of the statistic, and statistics will prove that potentially this Real Madrid team has the greatest goal scorer of all time in its ranks. So, I mean, Is it this way? Is it Cristiano Ronaldo versus Alfredo Di Stefano? I mean,
well, it's Ronaldo's team.
Is.
At least that's what you're covering with that, as opposed to it's not even Zidane's team. It doesn't feel like it's Zidane's team. Like he might do this remarkable thing, and it'll be like, well, it's really Ronaldo's team.
Could still lose his job if they have another poor La Liga season. Yeah, for sure.
Iniesta sitting on the pitch until 1 o'clock last night.
Yeah, I mean, a goodbye to it. Is that 1 o'clock? That's clearly still on. Just kind of reflecting on himself, reflecting on an unbelievable career at Barcelona. Obviously came to an end last night.
You know what? I bet you he's making a documentary. There's this unbelievable footage of Pep emptying his bag for the last time. I'm like, that's all a bit wanky, isn't it? But it was clearly staged. So I bet you Iniesta is there with his like 5 camera teams going, have you got the shot? 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 Colour me cynical.
Can you just look a little bit more sad there, Andres?
Yeah. And action. Done? Okay, away we go.
Can you make your kid cry there as well, Andres?
So there is that Guardiola. It's one of those Sky documentaries. Or maybe Sky didn't make it, but certainly it's people talking to him. And there is this footage of him like for the last time. You're like, wow, that's amazing that they filmed this. And you're thinking, he agreed to that. He wanted this to be recorded for posterity.
I'm sure Pep Guardiola has emptied his bag in dramatic fashion many a time over the past couple of months because, of course, the new Manchester City Amazon Prime documentary is set to come out over the next couple of weeks. So,
and action.
I'm looking forward. We should do a montage of all the dramatic cutaways of Pep, you know, in the background, taking his boots and putting them into his bag again.
That one was from the official UEFA Champions League Twitter account. So, anyway, right, let's move on. Stop being cynical.